Yo, what's up guys? Josh here, Magic Art Poker, back at Resorts World for another session. So we actually took a rest day yesterday. I had just gotten all-you-can-eat Korean barbecue at Master Kim's. Shout out to Sunny the dealer at Resorts World, who's Korean and recommended that place. Probably one of the best all-you-can-eat Korean barbecues in Vegas, actually. I've actually eaten at most of them and it was one of the better ones with great customer service. So definitely recommend checking it out. I went to the one in Chinatown in Spring Valley, but yeah, just wasn't feeling too good after. I was like really tired, so I actually slept from midnight to 6 a.m. Most normal sleep schedule this past month. One tip that Aero Poker, my coach, taught me is just to not eat like a big meal and then play, just because after you eat, you're like super tired. As you guys saw in one of the previous episodes, I had a massive punt at the win after I got, Denny's pancakes post 8-hour session. So the rest day was much needed. And yeah, I believe this is session number 35. Looking to book my 8th win in a row. So we're on a current win streak. And yeah, I think like things are just clicking, looking to just make the right decision in every spot, not get tilted, be process oriented. Like, when I was a losing player, for most of my life actually, I would mainly look to get the money in when I was behind super badly. Whereas now I try to avoid like flip situations and get the money in when I'm way ahead. Like Coach Arrow's always saying, like, if you have like, a situation and you run it 10 times, like you should play the hand in that simulation and do the decision that maximizes your, value, right? So just looking to make those right decisions that I know I'm capable of. And it's pretty crazy because today's like August 18th. I started the vlog around 2 weeks ago. I just uploaded episode 5 this morning and already at 630 subscribers. So it's really cool to see a lot of people tuning in on my journey. That episode was actually the tilt at the win session. So it's actually good for me to like reflect on these big losses and the mistakes I made to really just avoid making the same ones in the future, right? So with that being said, let's head on in to hit the 1-3 streets of Resorts World.
In the first notable hand of this session, the middle position limps, the low jack bumps up to $10, the hijack calls. We look down at pocket kings on the button, so we 3-bet to $35. The small blind gets out of the way, however, the big blind cold calls. The middle position, low jack, and hijack all come along. So going 5 ways of the flop with pocket kings. The flop comes jack 9-6 rainbow. So this is an okay flop for us. However, the issue is we are 5 ways, so the chance that someone has a piece of this board is actually really high. So when the action checks over to me, I go ahead and put a pretty small bet of $45, so around a quarter of the pot. Not looking to really pile a ton of money in when it's 5 ways. And good thing I make a smaller bet since the big blind now raises to $190, which is a massive raise size. The action folds back to me, and with pocket kings, I just go ahead and make the fold here. I might already just be drawing dead if he has a set or 2 pair, and I'm only drawing to 2 outs, right? Or in the case of 2 pair, I'm drawing to a few more outs, but just not worth it. Gonna wait for a better spot. And luckily this opponent told me later that he had, I believe, jack 6 suited. So he just smashed the flop with 2 pair, and we lose this first pot, but happy with how he played it. I feel like making decisions like this is kind of what separates profitable play from just donating, because a lot of people, especially in the low stakes games, they get married to their hands like I've done in the past and end up losing their whole stack with pocket aces, pocket kings, big pocket pairs just because they're not able to let them go. Just a few hands later, we're dealt another premium as the under the gun limps, and we look down at the lucky ladies pocket queens in the under gun +1. So we raise to $16. The low jack, hijack, button, and big blind all cold call, and the under the gun original limper gets out of the way. So going 5 ways of the flop again of 3-6-8 rainbow, and I would actually say this flop is better than the previous flop since the cards are all lower, so we really only need to be worried about like sets here. The only 2 pair combination that makes sense is 6-8 suited. So when the big blind checks to me, I go ahead and bet $35, which is almost half pot. The low jack calls, the hijack and button get out of the way, and the big blind also comes along. So going 3 ways of the turn, which is the king of hearts, which is not a good card for us. So when the big blind checks to me, for some reason, I think I was just trying to rep the king here, which in hindsight is like a pretty bad idea in case someone's actually holding a king. But I bet $85, just continuing the story that I have a strong hand. And luckily in this spot, the low jack and big blind both get out of the way. So we take the pot down, but not really happy with how I played this hand. I think a check on the turn would have been better, just because if any of our opponents had a king here, we're just value owning ourselves at this point. So better to just check the turn here, but nonetheless, always happy to win a pot. Around an hour later, we have a hand where the undergun raises to $10, the middle position calls. I look down at ace-2 suited on the hijack, which is a great hand, especially multi-ways since you can flop the wheel as well as the nut flush draw. So I go ahead and make the call as well, and the cutoff and button both come along. So going 5 ways to a flop of king 9-3 with 2 clubs. So in this situation, even though we don't have a pair, we're just sitting with ace high. We actually really like this board just because we have the nut flush draw, and in multi-way pots, I feel like the nut flush draw is a really great hand to have. I would much prefer to have this draw compared to something such as like a king here, just because top pair on this type of board texture is quite vulnerable, especially multi-way. So when the undergun bets for $30 as a continuation bet and the middle position folds, I go ahead and make the call since I'm going nowhere with a nut flush draw. You can make the argument to raise here, but I want to keep the other players in the pot just to build the pot in case they're also on a flush draw. So going heads up to the turn, we absolutely bink it, which is 3 of clubs. Not the best card in case my opponent had pocket kings or pocket nines, but he goes ahead and checks and slows down now. And now I want to bet for value, so I go ahead and throw out a bet of $50, which is just under half pot, and the under the gun makes the call. The river is a 7 of spades, which shouldn't really change too much. If he has a lower flush, I'm still beating him, and I'm ahead of any 2-pair type of holding. So when the undergun checks to me once again, I go ahead and bet a similar amount relative to the pot size of $100 into a pot of 314, and the under the gun makes the call. We show our hand, and we're good. So happy to hit my hand and get some value. I feel like in general, when you hit your hands, you want to get value and get paid off. The way that you maximize your winnings is you get paid off, right? I feel like if you play too nitty or you're like an OMC type of person, sometimes people won't pay you off when you bet strong. So I feel like it's pretty interesting because poker, it's a lot of psychology. Like, do you think this guy is bluffing? Do you think you're better than this guy? There's a lot of non-poker, non-card related dynamics that go into the hand, which kind of factor whether or not people pay you off in certain spots or fold to you. So again, happy to take another decent sized pot down. In this next hand, the low jack limps, the hijack bumps up to $13, the cutoff and button both make the call. I look down at the pocket rockets in the big blind, and I'm not slow playing this, especially out of position, so I 3-bet to $50. The low jack gets out of the way, however the hijack, cutoff, and button all come along. So going 4 ways to the flop with aces, which comes 10-2-2, which is a pretty safe flop for us. It's actually really dry since it's rainbow, and unless someone hits a 10, has a pocket pair in their hand, or has a random 2, then they can't really continue. So I go ahead and just bet half pot, and we take it down. It's never a good feeling to go multi-way with the aces, so always happy to take down the pot when they hold up. Nothing worse than getting your aces cracked. And this is just another classic 3-bet, C-bet, take it down type of situation. The reason you want to 3-bet your big hands is just because oftentimes your opponents are going to miss the flop, so you want to just take it down. Even if I had ace-king here, I'm going to probably take it down here if I C-bet. Although, if I had ace-king here, not sure if it's a good idea to C-bet out of position into 4 other people, but yeah, happy to take this one down with the pocket rockets. Alright, so the next notable hand, there's 2 limpers when we look down at king jack offsuit in the cutoff. So we bump it up to $18, which is a bit of a looser raise, but I think given the table dynamic, this was fine. The button and small blind call, the big blind gets out of the way, and the 2 limpers come along. 5 ways to the flop of king 4 jack with the diamond draw on board. So we flop top 2, however, this board is a bit connected and there's a diamond draw out there. So when the action checks over to me, I go ahead and bet $20, which honestly on this board texture with such a strong hand such as top 2, I really don't like this bet because I'm giving such a good price for the flush draw, but nonetheless, this is what happens in real time. This price is too much for the button as he gets out of the way. The small blind calls and the under the gun and hijack both fold. So the small blind is the same guy who re-raised me when I had pocket kings and I made the discipline fold, and he's a pretty fun guy to play with, so I feel like this kind of plays into the table dynamic. The turn comes a king of club, now giving us a boat. He now donk bets for $45, and I just flat call here, going nowhere, just really want to disguise my hand. If he does have a diamond draw, I just want him to get there. Now the river is where things get a bit weird. He checks dark, and then I bet dark $100 for some reason, which was actually like a freaking awful move. Terrible move, because that's so strong. And the river's a 5 of hearts, not really changing too much. So the action is back on him because he checked dark and I bet $100 dark. And since I was already talking to this guy and we're having like a good time, like just like table talk, having conversation, he shows 1 card. For some reason, I show 1 card, which I show the jack, thinking that it would be a good idea. Then he just folds face up, pocket 10s, thinking I have pocket jack. So I absolutely just like really misplayed this hand and lost out on some value. I feel like had I just waited till the river, I could have, Hollywooded a little bit and then made it seem like I was bluffing. But because I bet $100 dark, I'm not really bluffing here, right? Like no one really does that when they're bluffing unless they're like really gambly and just trying to bet on the draw, but it doesn't make sense here. So terrible play on my end to show 1 card in this specific scenario, just because I basically showed that I have like a strong pair. I was just trying to disguise my hand to make it seem like I don't have a boat, but yeah, totally misplayed this hand and probably lost out on at least $50 of value. So yeah, we'll move on to the next one. At this point in the night, we're actually doing pretty well. I think we're up like $200 or $300. I gotta check the exact number, but the session unfortunately takes a turn for the worse. At this point, the new kid sits down, and the best way to describe him is he looks like a Dungeons and Dragons, like GTO wizard type of player, which is gonna play into this next hand. So that's why I bring up that fact. You know, I got the feedback to stop like bring up personal details, but I do think it's kind of important to like make a note of players, just because at the end of the day, right, there's a lot of psychology involved. You know, people stereotype, like I'm sure everyone thinks I'm like a loose gambler, young Asian guy who's super aggro, so it kind of goes both ways. But anyways, on this hand, basically I look down at Queen 8 suited on the low jack, and I go ahead and bump it up to $10, and only this new player in the big blind makes the call. The flop comes Jack 10-9 rainbow, so we flop the second nut straight, which is an amazing flop. However, to our surprise, the big blind now bets $35 donk betting into us. We don't think this is enough since we have the second nut, so we go ahead and bump it up to $80, and our opponent makes the call. The turn is a 6 of clubs, which shouldn't really change anything except for the fact that now 7-8 gets there and there's a club draw on board, but we don't really put our opponent on this. So when he checks over to us, we bet $120, which is 2/3 size pot bet for value just to build the pot, and then the big blind goes ahead and makes the call. The river is not a great card, as now it pairs the board with another 6. The big blind all of a sudden now goes all in for $248, and this really puts me in the blender because it makes no sense since he led the flop, just flat called the flop raise, checked the turn, and now shoves the river. So I actually like think about it for quite some time, and I actually end up making the fold here. The reason I make the fold here is because I have done a similar line with donk betting when I had a set, like a flop set. However, the difference is when I did this line, I barreled all 3 streets. I didn't check the turn. As soon as I made the fold, there's another guy that I play with. He told me that, you know, because I folded face up, he was like, oh yeah, you were definitely good, because he's played with this guy. And it turns out this guy's an absolute maniac. I asked him later, like, oh, what'd you have? And he said, oh, any 6 is good. I'm like, what do you mean any 6 is good? I folded a freaking straight. I think he had Jack 9, so he flopped 2 pair. And for whatever reason, this hand tilted me out of oblivion. I actually texted Coach Hero about this hand, and he told me that I should have for sure called the river, but he got mad at me for opening Queen 8 suited. I mean, I think it was a bit short-handed, but it's still loose open. Like, when I open a hand such as Queen 8 suited and I flop a straight, I should never fold to the river aggression, just because I'm only losing to a boat here. I'm really only losing to pocket jacks, pocket 10s, pocket 9s, and then jack 6, 10-6, and 9-6, which I don't think he has there. And then maybe like king queen if he had that for a bigger straight. But the other piece of information I should have remembered is when this player first sat down, he bought it for 100, and I think there was like a raise, a couple callers, and then he just shoved with pocket 9s and then won that pot. So if he was willing to ship it all in with pocket 9s for $100, then none of those pocket pairs, jacks, 10s, and 9s would be in his range, since he would have 3-bet me, right? So yeah, this hand didn't really make sense, and then he wouldn't have led the turn with the 6s. So I think, like, for whatever reason, when I was just like scared I was up against a boat, I think I still had PTSD from the ace king offsuit hand where I hit the nut flush and the guy had a boat on me at the win. But that was a totally different hand, right? So really unhappy with how I played this hand, and to be honest, this like tilted me for the rest of the session, which we'll see unfold in a bit. So we reload, and 30 minutes later, I look down at ace king offsuit and a low jack. I go ahead and limp, planning the limp re-raise. The hijack raises the $18. The cutoff and button both fold. The small blind, who's the same kid from the last hand, calls. I go ahead and 3-bet now to $85 now that my trap is sprung. The hijack, who's the original raiser, gets out of the way, and the small blind makes the call. So rematch round 2, going heads up to the flop against the kid. Flop comes 10 queen king with the diamond draw on board. So this is a decent flop for us as we flop top as well as gutter ball. However, the small blind now donk jams for $309. We're going absolutely nowhere since this is kind of like the dream spot as this smashes our range. So we make the call. I go all in for less for $309, but I think he had like 318, so we're basically like similar stack. The run out comes 9 of hearts, 8 of diamonds, so not a good run out as the straight as well as diamond draw now gets there. And he shows king jack offsuit for a top pair with open ender on the flop, and he gets there on the turn. We actually had him dominated on the flop. I put it in the equity calculator and we were ahead, and we lose this one. I go ahead and reload for another $200 because I usually bring $1,000 to Resorts World. So we're down to the final buy-in, or half a buy-in, when this next hand happens, and this is just a punt, but yeah. The button straddle's on for $6. The low jack calls. The cutoff, who's the same kid from the previous 2 hands, raises the $20. The button gets out of the way, and I look down at ace 2 offsuit in the small blind. I see an ace, and I just go all in. The big blind and low jack get out of the way, and the kid, of course, makes the call. The run out comes 8-9 queen, 6 king. We were actually ahead of him, surprisingly, until the river, and he gets there. I guess this kid ran extremely hot since I ran into a player that played with him. The same guy who said I was good on the straight hand. He said he hit some crazy hand against his aces or something. And basically this kid ran $100 up to 3K. He was running absolutely insane, hitting every single hand. He was like playing aggressively and getting there, like with very low equity draws. So yeah, I guess when it rains, it pours when you're running well. And we end up losing this session. Honestly, I was like so tilted in the moment, but looking back on this hand recap, I really didn't make that bad of plays except for the very last hand I recapped. Of course, there are hands I didn't feature where I probably called too wide pre-flop and just bled out my stack. But yeah, this was a session that started well and ended poorly.
What's up, guys? Just finished the session. Yeah, it didn't go how I planned. Like, I felt like after that Queen 8 hand you guys saw, where I flopped the second nut straight, and then I raised the flop, bet the turn, and then folded to the river donk jam. I just got like really tilted because I had like played really well. I was in for like 200, crawled back out, and was like even a little bit up 4 hours in, and then that hand happened, and then I was down 200. And then I had another opportunity with like ace king, but then by that point I was already kind of tilting, playing too many hands. Another opportunity with ace king, and then I run into this guy again, and then he hits a straight. And even at the very end, I thought I was like shorter actually when I shoved the 169, but yeah, I jammed, and then I was actually ahead. Yeah, like king 10 suited at ace 2 offsuit. I shouldn't even jam that. And then yeah, he hit a king on the river. So yeah, I should have just left, but like it's like I couldn't leave. I'm glad I didn't bring 3 buy-ins, right? Usually I bring 1200, but today I only brought 960. So yeah, this loss kind of sucks. Like, it's sometimes like getting pushed off a hand where I should have just insta-called is worse than making a bad play, if that makes sense. I mean, it is a bad play. It's like a super nitty fold. And this kid kept bluffing after that, so I didn't realize like he was like a crazy player type of guy until later, just because he looked like a GTO wizard nerd kind of type of guy. So yeah, it sucks. It's a pretty big loss, honestly. Luckily, like my last win was sizable, but yeah, I mean, I need to go back and look at the footage. I don't really think I played like too awful. That I just had a few big mistakes, and then it led to the $960 loss, as you guys see on the screen. So kind of shitty end to this session, honestly. I could feel my emotions getting tilted after that Queen 8 hand. I should have just got up and left, honestly, because if I left after that hand, I would have only been down $200 this session, but instead I'm down like 960. So yeah, at the very least I should have walked around, but that's just the game of poker. I think sometimes when I go on a win streak, I get a little too cocky, or I kind of forget, right, what it's like to lose. So gonna sleep on this one and hopefully I can come out stronger tomorrow. But yeah, just the game of poker. Another reason why I don't think I could do this for a living, just because it's like so stressful, like having these losses and variance and play bad, run bad, all that stuff. So gonna take the L on this episode, but hit the ground running harder tomorrow. So see you guys in the next episode.